Então, a primeira pergunta para os nossos entrevistados nasce de uma afirmação na verdade, era estrategista da campanha do Bill Clinton, James Carville, em 1992, e ele cunhou uma frase que é "It's the economy stupid". Essa frase, na verdade, tentava explicar por que o Clinton ganhou a eleição, apesar do sucesso da Operação Desert Storm. Isso foi em 91, a eleição do Clinton foi em 92, e com essa operação de guerra, que foi a mais bem-sucedida grande operação depois do fracasso do Vietnã, que traumatizou realmente os Estados Unidos, havia um apoio de 90% da população ao governo Bush da época, e um ano depois ele é derrotado pelo Clinton e, supostamente, pelo menos na opinião do James Carville, eram as questões econômicas, a recessão econômica que havia então, que justificava essa derrota, por isso essa frase. Em 2024, a situação parece invertida. Os números da economia eram positivos, em vários sentidos, crescimento, desemprego, crescimento do salário, e a candidata do governo, Kamala Harris, que era vice-presidente, foi derrotada pelo Donald Trump. E essa pergunta que os nossos convidados irão responder agora.
So I think obviously elections are very complicated, things, and we don't get a lot of them to look at. They're kind of overdetermined. But I think the story of the economy is not as straightforward as people have made it out to be. It's true that compared with most of the world, the U.S. enjoyed a quite strong recovery from the COVID downturn. Much faster growth than certainly Western Europe or most of the rest of the rich world, and very low measured unemployment, rapid wage growth, and a lot of wage compression in particular. This has probably been the biggest closing of the gap between higher and lower wages, that we saw maybe in the Biden years since. In decades, probably, maybe since the 1970s. So if you look at those facts, you might say that it's strange that Biden would do so poorly, and in particular that there would be such a strong perception reflected in surveys that the economy was a point of failure and something that people were angry about. But I think if we take a somewhat bigger view, it's actually not so strange. It's true that wage growth, particularly at the bottom, was quite strong. A lot, if you're comparing wage growth to inflation, it can be quite sensitive to what exactly period you're looking at. But certainly, wage growth at the bottom, even after adjusting for inflation, was quite high. But wages are not the only form of income that people have. And I think really one of the central facts about the period leading up to the election economically is that we had a huge expansion of the social safety net during and immediately sort of following the pandemic. In that sense, I think the economic response to the pandemic is really was the most sort of successful response to any sort of economic disruption in U.S. history, and compares very favorably to most of the rest of the world. With direct stimulus payments to households, with the payments to businesses to avoid layoffs, with the unemployment insurance that was not only very generous in terms of the amounts, but was really reformed to ensure that almost everyone who lost their job actually received unemployment benefits, which has not been the case historically in the United States, not even close. Expanded food assistance, Medicaid assistance, free lunches for school children everywhere in the country. Medicaid, nobody was getting dropped from Medicaid, in this country. And, certainly if you're eligible for a program, you don't necessarily get it. A lot of poor people who should be getting Medicaid are not enrolled every year. And during a period where you don't drop anybody, a lot more people who are eligible are actually getting it. The moratorium on evictions. So a lot of measures were taken in 2020, 21.
Moratorium on student debt.
Yes, a moratorium on student debt. That's right. So a lot
Kids didn't have to pay for a while.
Yeah, a lot of measures were taken, starting in the final year of Trump, but then really expanded in the first year of the Biden administration to really greatly improve the economic security of a lot of people. And almost everything, essentially all of that, was then taken away a couple of years later. So if you are somebody going into the the election in the fall of 2024, and you're comparing your economic situation to what it was 2 or 3 years earlier, it's very reasonable, it's very rational to say things have gotten worse for me. even if your wages are up, even if your wages have much more than kept pace with inflation, which is true for many people, particularly at the bottom. If you look at your overall situation, you're paying on your student loans again. You may have lost access to Medicaid. You may be facing eviction. You may have you may have to be paying for your kids' lunches again. They're not getting free lunches. You're not guaranteed unemployment benefits if you lose your job. All this stuff has gotten materially worse for you. And I think when you take that bigger picture, it's actually not really strange. I think if somebody looked at the world in the fall of 2024 and they said, when Trump was president, the government started doing a lot of things to help improve my standard of living and my material conditions. And under Biden, they took it all away. That would not be a false perception.
Okay. Matias, you want to add something?
There's not much I can add to that story. I think that's absolutely correct. It says that it's the economy stupid at the end of the day. I think also, in the broader perspective that Josh was sort of talking about, the other thing that it's important to bear in mind is that while yes, it's true that people at the bottom were finally doing a little bit better, the overall sort of trajectory of working class people in the United States for the last 40 years has been one of relative wage stagnation. So although wages were falling up to the early 90s and then they go at the bottom up again, and the actual sort of average incomes of people at the bottom are more or less the same that they were in the 70s, and the quality of the jobs that were lost, so the 5 million manufacturing jobs that were lost. And not that Trump was particularly good in his populist sort of claims, but it is true that economic policy and a turn that was better done during Biden, and I think we're going to talk about that, of how to use the tariff policy and industrial policy to try to bring back certain sectors, like in manufacturing of chips and whatnot. All of those things started with Trump. So Trump had some credibility coming to the election as a populist that Biden did not. I think even if he was a pro-union sort of president, and many people in the unions had contacts with him. Certainly, AFL-CIO endorsed him, and so on and so forth. A lot of unions, he had last summer in the Republican, not Congress. What's the name? The convention. Thank you. Yeah, in the convention, he had the head of the Teamsters. So there was, at least in terms of the appearances, the political discourse, the populist discourse was something that was credible, and so I think that's part of the story too. But yeah, I think that Josh nailed it. The question is, the retreat, the numbers, by the way, if you look at poverty reduction, children's poverty reduction during the pandemic, it's actually somewhat shocking of how fast it fell, and how much this proves that simple interventions can sort of help solve basic problems, and the numbers went back up. So and this was known, I should say. So Democrats knew about this because there were many papers from DC think tanks saying exactly this. Look, we reduced poverty during this period. Why are we not doing this still? So.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that because it's such a vivid illustration of this whole dynamic. In 2021, we had the largest ever, by a fair margin, reduction in child poverty rates in the United States in 1 year. And then in 2022, we had the largest ever increase in child poverty rates in 1 year. So, of course, people are pissed off. The other thing that we should just to amplify a little bit of what Matias was saying, a lot of this expansion of the safety net happened in 2020 under Trump and with the Republican Senate as well. The pandemic unemployment insurance, which I really feel is the model that we should be looking for any future downturn. Not that we probably will, but that was passed, under Trump, and so he did. You can argue about how that happened, and certainly Trump went along with it. Perhaps he wasn't certainly, didn't dream it up in any sense, but nonetheless, it happened in his presidency. And so, as Matias said, he actually did come in with some credibility on that.
I should say just a Brazilian example, and this might be interesting because the pandemic happened in Brazil during Bolsonaro, and Bolsonaro was against expanding the Bolsa Familia that they changed for Bolsa Brazil or whatever was the name. But Congress then said no, he vetoed it. He didn't want it. Congress passed it. And he said no, and then ended up increasing the size, and then in the year of the election he actually expanded social transfers. So there is a lesson here that right wingers may have discovered during the pandemic that there was a positive sort of political effect of increasing the transfers. So I think that Trump is many things, but he's not necessarily politically unsavvy. So I think that he might have sensed that politically this was something he had to do.